A few months ago, I was looking to buy a Blu-ray copy of cinematic masterpiece The Room by Tommy Wiseau. So I go to TommyWiseau.com. Obviously, I order the Blu-ray underwear bundle because I'm not an idiot. And then I go to check out. One problem though, TommyWiseau.com does not ship to Europe. Thankfully though, Tommy has not one, not two, but 3 websites that he sells merch from. And one of them, TheRoomMovieStore.com, did ship to Europe. So I add my items to the cart, go to checkout, ask Tommy if he could sign my Blu-ray, and then place my order. A few moments later, I get an automated email saying that my order had been received, and then I never heard from him again. There was no sending confirmation, no tracking number, nothing. It's at this point I checked my bank account and yup, the payment had very much gone through. And after a few weeks of radio silence, I started to worry that Tommy had simply taken my money and ran. But after reading the testimonials of fellow shoppers online, they assured me that this was completely normal, and all I needed to do was to sit tight, and my package would most likely arrive within 1 to 8 months. And wouldn't you know it, just 1.5 months later, the package arrives. In it was a triple pack of Tommy Wiseau briefs, a headshot signed by Tommy himself. Now, there was no Blu-ray in the box. He forgot the Blu-ray. Now, if this was any other independent film schmuck, I'd be very annoyed at this. But since this is Tommy, it's just funny. Tommy is a very interesting guy, though, isn't he? There's no one quite like him in the world. Like, where is that accent from?
Do you know how to make the crazy hamburger? Crazy hamburger? Yeah. Put the right way and then sideways, you have crazy hamburger.
Well, turns out no one knows where he's from. Alright, well, how old is he? The dude looks like he could be basically any age.
I'll be honest with you, I feel like I'm 34.
Right.
And that's number one.
We don't know that either. Hell, even his surname, Wiseau, is a name he created for himself. No one else in the world has that name. Turns out, people have been trying to figure out who this guy is for decades now. Who is he? Where's he from? But maybe most interestingly, where did he get the money? See, unlike a lot of other movies with a similar cult status, The Room had a pretty substantial budget for an independently financed film, around $6 million, all paid out of pocket by Tommy himself. And no one is quite sure how he did it. This is a mystery I will explore in depth in this video, and ultimately not give a satisfactory answer to. But really, the money mystery is just one of the many puzzle pieces that comprises the infinite enigma that is Tommy Wiseau. In general discussion, Tommy is usually seen in connection with his magnum opus, The Room, a movie that is regarded as one of the worst of all time, and yet has one of the most dedicated fan bases for any movie in history. But there's more to Tommy than his one breakout hit, and that's what I want to explore today. In short, I will attempt to answer the age-old question, who is Tommy Wiseau? Going into this project, I figured that this shouldn't be that hard of a question to answer. Tommy has done dozens, if not hundreds of interviews over the years, most of which are publicly archived online. So just by going through them all, we should be able to piece together a picture of who this man really is. So, here goes. Tommy Pierre Wiseau was born in 1968. He is a self-described ragin' Cajun, born and raised in New Orleans.
Know your deal. You grew up in New Orleans?
I grew up in New Orleans. I moved out to California.
Being a good Southern boy, Tommy quickly learned the virtues of good, honest labor. And by the time he reached maturity, he was a solid enough craftsman to construct an entire building from scratch.
You know, for example, in my case, I build buildings, steel frame building. I can talk about entire day today, you know, how to build a building.
Tommy had the life, but he wasn't really living. He wanted something greater than what his old Louisiana town could give him. Tommy wanted to conquer Hollywood, so he packed his bags and moved out to San Francisco. Far from being just a salient craftsman, he was also a crafty salesman, and he made substantial profit from selling toys on the San Francisco dock.
Because, Tommy, we know you started selling little toy birds in San Francisco.
And let's face it, you can't make a dime doing that.
Is that a good business?
Yeah.
You'll be surprised, actually.
With the money he had earned from selling yo-yos and bird toys, Tommy started his own retail chain, Street Fashions USA, a clothing store chain specializing in jeans and apparel.
I started my own business, basically.
Street Fashions USA?
Yes, that's basically.
Damn, Sam knows
retail store.
That eventually earned him enough money to enter the San Francisco real estate market, which is where Tommy earned most of his fortune.
How did you make the money?
In real estate business and retail business.
But how do you get the real estate?
You buy a building, you sell it.
But how did you get?
By the time the 90s rolled around, Tommy was a bona fide millionaire. But he wasn't a Hollywood star. Not yet. So he started taking acting classes, film classes, and even went to an accent coach to try and mellow out his southern drawl. Eventually, he started contacting local agencies and Hollywood bigwigs in hopes of kickstarting his acting career. However, it was here that Tommy discovered firsthand what us film enthusiasts have known for years. Hollywood does not care about new ideas.
I would say one word, love is blind, Hollywood is corrupted, but we love everybody.
Undeterred by this, Tommy kept taking acting classes, including a 10-year at the Gene Shelton Acting Lab.
I'm going to a certain hotel in San Francisco, and I see the big sign, Gene Shelton Acting Class. I said, you know what? I used to want to sing. You know what? Maybe I want to be an actor right now.
And it was through Shelton's acting classes that Tommy met Greg Sestero, a lifelong friend and colleague, and who would later go on to play the character Mark in The Room.
It's funny, people always say, like, where did you meet that man, right? Well, in an acting class, of all places.
It was also around this time that Tommy, after being influenced by the cinematic greats of the past, started writing the first drafts of his magnum opus, The Room.
We all take influence from stuff.
Again, you misunderstood what I'm saying.
Okay,
Nobody influenced me.
Okay.
I influenced myself. That's the bottom line.
After being influenced by himself, Tommy started writing the first drafts of his magnum opus, The Room. Being dissuaded by the stiffness of the Hollywood executives, Tommy decided to completely fund the film himself, giving him an artistic freedom unlike any other Hollywood director. The Room was a technical landmark in cinema. It was the first movie ever to be shot with a 35mm film camera and HD camera at the same time. And no, I don't mean like a multicam setup, I mean they built a custom rig to hold both the cameras at the same time. This was because at the time, there was no available documentation detailing the differences between these two types of cameras.
At the time, and still today, you do not have a book that say, okay, this is HD, this is 35.
The Room is a sharply crafted black comedy. It's a film that's been compared to the likes of Citizen Kane and Shakespeare, often by Tommy himself.
So you can compare, again, Citizen Kane with The Room.
However, it was ahead of its time. The Room performed abysmally in its original box office run. But Tommy knew he had something special. He continued pumping money into advertising, even spending thousands of dollars renting a massive billboard in Hollywood for 5 straight years.
You rented a billboard in Los Angeles for 9 years to advertise your film.
Partially is correct. Actually, it's 5 years.
And you know what? It worked. The Room would slowly take on a life of its own through word of mouth. It was initially picked up by film students who would show the movie to their friends, who would then show the movie to their friends. You add to that the rising adoption of the internet, and suddenly you have a wildfire on your hands. Eventually, Tim and Eric got wind of it. Famous internet celebrities like Doug Walker and I Hate Everything would start discussing it at length, and they would both get copyright strikes. Oops. As the 2010s moved on, Tommy would even go on tour, screening The Room in sold-out theaters all over the country. And these screenings are an event too. Forget Rocky Horror Picture Show, The Room is where it's at.
If a lot of people love each other, the world would be a better place to live.
To be 18 now, go, keep the change. Hi, doggy. Hi, doggy.
I prepare all this stuff and I want people to have a good time, interact between the screen. This is new entertainment.
In 2017, Tommy's story would be made into a blockbuster called The Disaster Artist, a real Hollywood production detailing the making of The Room and the unlikely friendship between Tommy and Greg Sestero.
What is line?
The role of Tommy Wiseau would be played by James Franco, who would go on to win a Golden Globe for his performance.
First person I have to thank is the man himself, Tommy Wiseau.
And there he was, a man once rejected by the industry finally being able to rise above. That little kid from New Orleans had finally conquered Hollywood. Since then, Tommy has mostly been out on the road, screening the movie worldwide for thousands of fans. His new film, Big Shark, is screening in theaters at this very moment. Sadly though, not any theaters near me, but I'm looking forward to seeing it. I might like it, I might not. Either way, that's okay. Because, in the immortal words of Tommy Wiseau,
you can laugh, you can cry, you can express yourself, but please don't hurt each other. Enjoy the room, have fun, and I love you all. Thank you.
No, actually, I grew up in New Orleans, Louisiana.
Understood.
I used to work.
But no one in New Orleans has an accent this
Well, you should live in New Orleans.
Really?
Uh-huh.
I don't know if this will surprise you or not, but Tommy is not actually from New Orleans. Tommy is very guarded when it comes to revealing basically any info about himself. I think it's rare for him to outright lie, but in general, Tommy is willing to go to extreme lengths to hide his personal information from the general public.
The other two mysteries are how old he is.
Right.
I hate to blow him up, but he tried to use a... you have to use an ID to get into your building. He tried to use a fake ID.
12 years old.
They just
How
called
old
him on
do
it.
Usually when someone asks him about his age, his money, or anything else he doesn't want to answer, he tends to just refuse the question altogether.
Why the mystery about where you're from?
It's not important. Move on next question.
So your hair, so you have real blonde hair?
Well, let me try it this way. You watch the show and you enjoy it. Move on, next question.
Okay.
It's clear that Tommy is not keen on putting his personal life to public scrutiny, which, to be clear, is a very valid point of view. The man has a right to privacy after all, though in the absence of answers, creative minds will start to make their own. Because the thing is, Tommy Wiseau is a multi-millionaire whose fortune defies simple explanation. As stated before, The Room is estimated to have cost $6 million to make, not to mention the hundreds of thousands of dollars spent marketing the movie. And Tommy is very flighty when explaining how he acquired these funds.
I know you've managed to raise $6 million to make this fine film that we all love. I was just curious, how did you raise that budget?
That's not your ad business. Move on.
Where does a guy like Tommy get enough cash to fund a $6 million vanity project? Did he really build a multi-million-dollar fortune off of selling yo-yos in the street of San Francisco like he claims? It sounds absurd. Unsurprisingly, perhaps, there have been many rumors about how Tommy found his fortune. Some of them being that Tommy has been involved with the mob, that he's been involved with drugs or human trafficking, that he's cruising of a fat inheritance, that he's living off of lawsuit money. Now, I can't speak to the veracity of any of these rumors, but I will say this. I don't think Tommy is being this secretive of his identity to cover up any shady business. Rather, I think the reason Tommy does not want to indulge where he's originally from or what his birth name is because Tommy is aggressively American.
We live in America and we will say together, if you want, USA! USA! USA!
According to Greg Sestero, when he first visited Tommy's apartment, it was filled with trinkets bearing the American flag. On Tommy's building on Beach Street, Tommy has erected 2 massive flagpoles, also flying the American flag. Tommy does not celebrate Thanksgiving Day. He celebrates Thanksgiving month, eating a full Thanksgiving meal every afternoon for 30 straight days. I do think Tommy genuinely loves America. It's the country that gave him his success. He moved there with nothing, and by the end he was at the top. His love for all things America even extends to silly things, like how the one thing he didn't like about the Disaster Artist movie was that it depicted him being bad at American football.
But I do actually approve 99.9%. And 1% is
true.
because he doesn't know how to to play football.
No, that's not what he said to me.
Well, Tommy wasn't born in America. It's clear that America is his home, and I do think that he wants nothing more than to be accepted as an all-American guy. Plus, from reading The Disaster Artist, it seems that Tommy has a lot of baggage from his early life, which he'd like to distance himself from.
Was there trauma in your life?
Well, you know, we always, when you want to be an actor, you always have trauma. So,
but was there an emotional trauma where you said, hey, I'm going to reinvent myself. I don't want to ever think about my childhood?
Yeah, you may say that. Yeah, that's put pretty well.
The book goes into this with more detail, but safe to say it's fairly heavy stuff, and it's understandable why he'd want to put his past behind him like that. Because of that, I don't want to spend too much time on Tommy's pre-American life, what Little there is to know, but I will give a brief summary of Tommy's life as recorded in the book The Disaster Artist by Greg Sestero and Tom Bissell. When asked about where he's from, Tommy will often insist that he's from New Orleans.
What part of America are you from? Poland, Czechoslovakia, or France?
Well, you know, I grew up in New Orleans, Louisiana. You pulled my legs again, but that's okay. Move on. Next question.
Now, I know I kind of scoffed at this answer earlier, but this is technically true. It also isn't what most people mean when they ask Tommy where he's from. It wasn't until around the release of The Disaster Artist that Tommy would finally start admitting to the public that he was originally from Europe.
You will not say where you're from?
No, I can tell you.
Oh, tell me.
I'm originally from Europe, but I'm right now American.
Whoa.
Like everybody else.
In the book, Sestero claims that Tommy was born in an Eastern Bloc country somewhere between 1953 and 1968. Documentarian Rick Harper, who's been researching Tommy for years, is even more specific, putting his place of birth down to Poland in 1955.
See, everyone out there thinks you're Polish, and I'm half Polish.
That's good.
So I was excited to hear that.
Yeah, move on. Next question.
As a child, Tommy had a fascination with all things America, and he would read about America in books and magazines whenever he could. For Tommy, America represented a level of opportunity and comfort that he wasn't afforded in his war-torn homeland. Of course, living in a Soviet satellite state, access to American culture and media was very restricted. So he starts cooking up a way for him to escape to the West. He bribes his way onto a bus that goes to France, where he works as a dishwasher under the name Pierre. Though being an undocumented immigrant in a foreign country left him in a very vulnerable position, and after a string of bad incidents and shitty jobs, he manages to book a plane to America. There, he seeks refuge with his uncle and aunt in Chalmette, a small town on the outskirts of New Orleans.
And I used to live in Chalmette. Chalmette is I would say from 5 miles from New Orleans, okay?
In Chalmette, Tommy works as a stock boy at Schwegmann's, a local grocery store. It does pay the bills, but it's unfulfilling work. After feeling like he has no prospects in New Orleans, Tommy makes his way to San Francisco. There, he gets a job selling yo-yos and bird toys on a place called Fisherman's Wharf, which was an old fishing district that had recently been redeveloped into a tourist location. Eventually, he gets really good at selling yo-yos and bird toys, to the point where he earns the nickname Birdman. And that is where the name Wiseau comes from. Bird in French is Wiseau, which, when combined with Tommy's original last name, then becomes Wiseau.
Wiseau means birds, if you put O. So you can say Wiseau, you can say Ozo, it's fine. Whatever you pronounce, I accept it. Move on.
Beyond the toy-selling gig, Tommy would reportedly do random odd jobs on the side. This includes working at a hospital and being a busboy at a local Italian restaurant. At some point, he moves from peddling his wares on the street to setting up a little souvenir stall. Alongside toys, Tommy now sells all kinds of knickknacks and souvenirs, and even jeans and pleather jackets. This souvenir stall is important because it's the beginning of what would become Tommy's main hustle in the following decades, Street Fashions USA. Street Fashions USA is a clothing retailer created and operated by Tommy Wiseau. It has roots going back to the 1970s and is still operating in some form today. Up until around the early 2000s, Street Fashions operated several physical locations in the San Francisco area, though all of these have since shut down. Street Fashions is where Tommy claims he made his first fortune, and because of that, it's largely shrouded in myth. There's very little knowledge available about Street Fashions and how it operated, but I've attempted to piece things together from public records, the Disaster Artist book, and what little testimonials I could find online. Decidedly, the most important source for this segment was Aaron Barrett, who was employed by Street Fashions from 1991 to 2002. In 2014, he would appear on the podcast Fraudcast to discuss his time working under Tommy Wiseau.
And the, well, not the reason that we had Aaron Barrett on, but I mean, it helps. But he worked for Tommy Wiseau for 10 years, 11 years?
11 years. Insane. 1 month.
This interview was crucial for filling in a lot of blanks. In total, I found 6 supposed Street Fashions locations, as well as a souvenir shop that might have been registered under the Street Fashions name. The most famous street fashions location is probably the one on 555 Beach Street, notable for its snazzy pants decor and its sun-bleached The Room poster. Tommy famously owns this entire building, and parts of The Room were even filmed here. Street fashions usually dealt in jeans and general apparel, specializing in Levi's and Converse. The building on Beach Street even had a fat Levi's logo painted on the side.
And I designed stuff as well. I was very close with Levi's company.
In the book, Sestero kind of implies that Tommy sold pirated or bootleg jeans at his stores, writing, "The self-described king of Levi's sells jeans with missing belt loops and botched stitching."
You cannot sell Levi's, bootlegging Levi's, meaning not real Levi's. It's completely nonsense.
What's perhaps more likely is that Tommy sold irregular jeans, jeans with some cosmetic defect sold at a lower price. It's possible that Tommy bought defective Levi's in bulk and then sold these for a markup at his stores. The stores themselves were mostly situated around Fisherman's Wharf, a notable San Francisco tourist location, and most of their business was catered towards tourists.
So you say he sold Levi's. Were they like real Levi's or were
Yeah,
they fucked up Levi's? Like,
because all these tourists would just eat that stuff up.
Really?
Yeah,
they would just buy Levi's because they were there instead of
you
walking.
get people
like,
who would want to buy large quantities so they could bring them back to Europe or Asia
wow.
and sell them for a profit.
It's a souvenir purchase.
Stuff.
As a manager, Tommy is described as a bit of a control freak, but ultimately a good guy who paid his employees quite well. He would even pay for his employees to visit Hawaii every 5 years, covering hotel and flight costs for a whole week.
Remind me of Hawaii. I used to send an employee to Hawaii for recreation when I have business street fashion.
As Tommy focused more and more time on his acting career, street fashion slowly languished in obscurity, and the stores would all officially close around 2003. Street Fashions exists today as an online-only marketplace, with loose plans of reopening physical locations sometime in the future. For what it's worth, street fashion seems like a fairly profitable business. I do get the impression that Tommy is a hard worker with a knack for knickknacks, if you will. Even today, his online store is a lot more ambitious than your average filmmaker. On his many websites, Tommy sells custom leather jackets and briefs, plus Tommy Wiseau plushies, tank tops, keychains, ties, footballs.
Oh, it's the Room. It's the Room football.
It's original, by the way.
And this is I love this. This is what makes Tommy Wiseau so great. He throws me this football that says, "Let's play it," because that's the line from the movie.
Basketballs, bracelets, belts, backpacks, and a dozen different Tommy Wiseau watches. I doubt the build quality is that great, but it's impressive that he's able to maintain a collection like that. He also claims to design a lot of it himself.
Yes, Tommy is a designer. The designer.
His most prized clothing, however, is the Tommy Wiseau underwear. Tommy is weirdly obsessed with underwear.
I'm crazy about underwear because each time I buy it, it's supposed to be the best of the best, right?
For example, the underwear what I designed, it's have double stitching. When you wash it, you can wash at least 100 times, nothing happen. And I feel my underwear is the #1 underwear in the world.
Tommy is so confident about his underwear that he bundles it with pretty much everything he sells, hence the Blu-ray underwear bundle from earlier. But also weirder combinations like the Room script plus Tommy Wiseau brief bundle. He is also very quick to put product placement of his own underwear into his work.
I bought the new underwear, Tommy Wiseau underwear. You like it?
Oh yeah, that's another kind of no-no in the office.
Did you have dicks to that?
Yeah, of course, straight to my underwear.
Oh yeah, what kind of underwear you wear?
The Tommy's, of course.
That's what I bought. Tim told me to buy it, you see?
Gee, Jimmy, 2 pairs? All in all though, I do think street fashions was a fairly profitable venture for Tommy. But it's also not where Tommy made most of his fortune. Because the truth is a lot darker than that. It's not that he's in with the mafia, it's not that he sells drugs, but the reality is that Tommy Wiseau is a landlord. Tommy owns a fair bit of real estate. It's hard to pinpoint exactly how much he owns, but it's definitely in the multi-million-dollar range. And my guess is that he rents out a lot of these properties for a substantial profit. If you go to 555 Beach Street today, you'll find a pizza zone, spy shop, and a landscaping business. And all of these businesses are most likely paying leases to Tommy. On top of that, Tommy is also said to rent out apartments, with one Reddit user writing, "Tommy owns more than one apartment building in San Francisco. A good friend of mine lives in one of them. She tells me he comes around every so often and does his own maintenance work." Now obviously, some rando on Reddit is not the most bulletproof source, but from what I can tell, Tommy does own at least one apartment building, and has probably owned more in the past. I'm guessing most of the budget of the room was financed by real estate money. In fact, right before shooting the room, Tommy sold one of his buildings for $2.9 million. That's half the budget right there.
Can I tell you one thing?
Tell me.
Okay, you buy a building, let's say for $2 million, you sell it for $6 million.
Yes.
So you make $4 million. What about that?
So that's the mystery solved, right? Tommy started as a penniless yo-yo peddler in San Francisco, worked himself up to create a successful clothing retailer, and eventually managed to accumulate enough money to buy himself into the real estate market, where he eventually became a multimillionaire. A beautiful, real-life example of the American dream. This is Tommy's version of events, and it's certainly plausible. However, there are a few questions that are yet to be answered. In my research for this video, I stumbled across a page for Tommy Wiseau on something called Mystery Wiki. It's a pretty well-researched page and contains a lot of information that is hard to come by elsewhere, but there was one thing in particular that caught my eye. According to this page, there exists a listing stating that one Thomas Wiseau incorporated a business called Street Fashions in January of 1979, also registering an address at 286 Jefferson Street around the same time. If these listings are accurate, this would most likely be when Tommy first opened his first souvenir stall, which would eventually evolve into the Street Fashions franchise. Now, I can't confirm these listings myself. While this is all publicly available information, these listings go so far back that I don't think I'll be able to confirm them without actually going to San Francisco in person. That being said, according to Barrett, Tommy did run a souvenir stand at that address.
And then he had a little souvenir shop, which was in Casagnolas. There's a little walkway in Casagnolas, and there used to be half of it would be, cracked crab, and our side was sweatshirts and snow globes and shit.
Casagnolas, by the way, is an Italian seafood restaurant located at 286 Jefferson Street, the same address mentioned on the Mystery Wiki. Going on Google Street View even reveals that there was a souvenir shop there until recently. From this, we can reasonably conclude that Tommy probably set up his first souvenir stall right here as early as January 1979. But that raises a few questions, because setting up a stall like this costs money. Purchasing stock, paying rent, getting a vendor's license. You need a fair bit of capital to set up a stall like that. And according to Greg Sestero, Tommy was dead broke when he first came to San Francisco in 1978. If this is true, it means that he must have acquired those funds less than a year after moving there. Did he really make all that money over the course of a few months selling yo-yos to tourists? To me, this all would imply that Tommy had some sort of outside help to kickstart his business. And as it turns out, yeah, he did. In fact, Tommy credits his success to one man in particular, Drew Caffrey. Thomas will later say, cryptically and often, that Drew Caffrey was central to his inimitable rise. When asked how, though, Thomas cavils, saying only that Caffrey was kind, smoked a pipe, wore a cowboy hat, and taught him many things about life. Drew Caffrey is a mysterious figure in the Tommy Wiseau saga. Apparently, he was a mentor/father figure for Tommy and helped him get a start in business. According to Sestero, it was Caffrey's connections that helped Tommy set up his souvenir stall in the first place. The thing about Drew Caffrey is that no one knows who he is. All we know is that he was about 15 years older than Tommy and that he helped Tommy get his start in business. Was he a wealthy benefactor, or was he just a savvy guy who taught Tommy a thing or two about how to succeed in business? We don't know. What we do know is that Drew Caffrey is credited as an executive producer and casting director for The Room, which is very impressive considering that he'd been dead for years when the movie started production. But Caffrey wasn't the only person in Tommy's corner. According to Barrett, Tommy also had a business partner when running Street Fashions.
From what I remember and from what Matt had told me back in the early days is that he had a partner named Eli. And that they were partners in the stores or whatever. And Eli died of AIDS, I believe. And then I guess that guy's sister kind of inherited the stuff, and Tommy ended up buying her out, basically. So by the time I started working for him, it was just him.
As far as I can tell, Tommy has never mentioned this business partner anywhere. One detail that caught my eye though is that Tommy supposedly bought him out after his death. This implies that this Eli guy might have had some ownership of the stores and/or the Street Fashions franchise. When he passed away, Tommy bought out whatever his stake in the company was, and by at least 1991, Tommy was the sole owner of the franchise. After operating the souvenir stall for a while, Tommy would eventually open up some actual retail stores. He opened a location at Anchorage Shopping Center across the street and one on Taylor Street near the Fisherman's Wharf sign. In 1992, he purchased the property on 555 Beach Street for $1.2 million, a property Tommy still owns to this day. This building is valued at $2.8 million in today's money, so quite a lucrative investment on Tommy's part. Tommy then opened more Street Fashions locations at Sutter Street, Dorr Street, and Haight Street, though the details on when these stores opened are vague. According to Sestero, Tommy had the building on 555 Beach Street demolished and rebuilt at some point. And looking at the building permits for the property, you'll find a permit application for horizontal and vertical dated 2nd of February 1995 to the tune of $860,000, suggesting that they started rebuilding around that time. Coincidentally, that same year, a fire broke out in an apartment building on 123 Dorr Street. The fire spread to the neighboring apartment buildings, including 135 Dorr Street, which Tommy owned. This fire not only caused significant damage to Tommy's building, but also led to the death of one man. However, in the aftermath of the blaze, something bizarre happens. Thomas submits a video to his insurance company detailing his damages. This video is tastelessly scored to classical music, includes local news footage of the burned man's death announcement, and contains testimony from a material witness who affirms Thomas's damages and good character. When this witness stops praising Thomas, the cameraman eggs him on to continue. Anything else you can say good things about Thomas? Thomas, of course, is the cameraman. The material witness, who for some reason wears a white lab coat, is Drew Caffrey. There he is again. Very bizarre. Looking at the building permits for this property reveals an application for restoration of a fire-damaged building with a construction cost of $550,000. Tommy would in later years claim to have built several buildings in the Bay Area, and I guess we know of at least two, one on Beach Street and one on Dorr Street. I guess if I had to wrap this up, I'd say that at the end of the day, I have yet to see any evidence to suggest that Tommy is lying about where he got his fortune. Street fashion seemed like a profitable business back in the day, and San Francisco real estate is an appreciating asset. I also think it's very difficult to establish a clothing retailer on your own in such a small window of time, and Tommy probably had people around him to assist in making his American dream a reality. What we do know is that Tommy was not satisfied as a retail baron and had aspirations to become something greater, so he started his long and winding pursuit of becoming a successful actor. In the mid to late 80s, Tommy would start by taking classes at local colleges. He apparently started by taking classes in psychology and method acting at Laney Community College.
I studied psychology. I graduated from Laney College in the Bay Area. And
which college?
Laney College.
Around 1988, Tommy would begin to take ESL lessons from a woman named Chloe Lietsky in order to work on his accent. Tommy and Chloe would also maintain some sort of relationship outside of these lessons, though the nature of their relationship is unknown. Chloe is her name. Maybe she is my girlfriend, maybe not. You might meet her, but not at this time. The relationship between Tommy and Chloe is elaborated further in the film A Room Full of Spoons, which is a 2016 documentary detailing the making of The Room. Now, this part is kind of tricky because I haven't actually been able to obtain a copy of this documentary myself for reasons I will get into later. But apparently, Chloe is said to have contributed financially to Tommy at some point. Like Drew Caffrey, Chloe is also credited as an executive producer of The Room. Tommy would also partake in film classes at the Los Angeles Community College in the late 80s.
Do film school teachers know what they're talking about?
99% no.
Interestingly enough, Tommy was still living in San Francisco at the time, which meant that he had to commute from San Francisco to LA by airplane for all his classes. This was apparently going on in the late 80s, so he was probably pretty wealthy by then. I do wonder though how Tommy found the time to attend multiple community colleges while simultaneously working as a retail baron in San Francisco. I guess he's just built different. At some point, Tommy would move to Los Angeles and make a real push to fulfill his Hollywood acting dreams, taking acting classes at the Vincent Chase Acting Workshop. He's a good teacher. The Vince was tough cookie. He'd kick your ass. Vincent Chase was described as a very no-nonsense kind of instructor, and presumably did not take kindly to Tommy's acting attempts. Distraught and disillusioned, Tommy decided to put his acting dreams on hiatus for now, and move back to San Francisco. But around 1996, Tommy would be involved in a car accident that changed his life forever. To make long story short, I had accident. I was driving and got hit by a guy who runs the red light. This accident nearly killed him and left him hospitalized for many weeks, but it gave him a new lease on life and invigorated his drive to achieve his acting dreams. He started taking classes at the Gene Shelton Acting Lab in San Francisco, where he would meet his soon-to-be best friend, Greg Sestero. Greg Sestero is kind of the Herodotus in Tommy's story. Most of what we know about Tommy's personal life comes from Sestero, and from here on out the story of Tommy's life is significantly better preserved. The two would start off as scene partners for Gene Shelton's acting class, which then spun off into a genuine friendship. At some point, Greg told Tommy that he wanted to move to Los Angeles to pursue his acting career. Tommy, as it happened, had an apartment in LA, which he would let Greg lease for a heavily discounted price. Greg graciously accepted and moved into Tommy's apartment shortly after.
Yeah, I want to move to LA, but it's not easy. I mean, you know, it's like you come down here, it's a new place, where are you going to live? He's like, I have an apartment in Los Angeles, empty. You know, you can rent, charge you $200. And I'm like, yeah, I mean, I'll at least check it out.
However, a few months later, Tommy would inexplicably move in with him without warning, leaving the two struggling actors to share the apartment together. Greg was maintaining a modest career success, being signed to a respectable agent and booking roles like young Toulon in Retro Puppet Master. This inspired Tommy to chase his acting dreams as well. One of the most important milestones you need to hit if you're planning on becoming an actor is getting your SAG card, i.e. a membership in the Screen Actors Guild. There's a few different ways of becoming a member, but in general, one of the membership requirements is that you need to have been employed as an actor in an official production. Tommy, however, was not getting any work. No employment means no SAG card. So what did Tommy do? Well, one of the possible requirements for membership was having a principal role in a commercial. So Tommy bankrolled his own commercial and cast himself as a principal role.
To be or not to be? That is the question. The answer to be a street fashion.
Some of you guys know I did the first commercial to get my SAG card. I worked very hard for it.
This was a stroke of genius, and it allowed Tommy to essentially buy his way into the Screen Actors Guild. I'm pretty sure this loophole has since been patched, by the way, since in order to get a membership now, you need to be employed by a SAG-certified production. You can't just employ yourself anymore like Tommy did. But looking closer at this commercial again, there is something very odd going on. Notice that weird transition in the middle? At first, I thought he did that to make it fit into like a 30-second time slot or something, but if you go frame by frame, you can see why he cut it. It lists the location of 3 of his street fashion stores. As far as I know, the full, unaltered version of this commercial is yet to be archived. Tommy would continue taking acting classes at the Stella Adler Academy and later at the American Conservatory Theater. And it's around this time that Tommy starts writing the first draft of a screenplay that he's working on, dividing his time between writing and acting work. Unfortunately, Tommy still struggled getting auditions. He would spend thousands of dollars on headshots and send them out to anyone who would take them. And yet, nothing. Despite wanting to pursue his acting dreams more than anything, Tommy was completely unable to find work. Distraught by this, Tommy became increasingly depressed, and one day, he simply disappeared. Tommy was unreachable. The daily phone calls between him and Greg Sestero were long gone, and he had stopped responding to Greg's phone calls entirely. But every few weeks he would call Greg himself, sounding very distraught. "I'm in a bad place. I'm scared. In your message you talk about the highway. Well, I'm on highway. The highway of hell. Highway of dying. Highway of survival. It really is hell right now. I don't know what to do." Tommy was in a dire place, seemingly without anyone around him being able to support him. But a few weeks later, he returned in seemingly good spirits. As it turns out, Tommy had spent the last months writing and perfecting his screenplay, and now his script was finally complete. The name of the script was, of course, The Room. When critiquing any piece of art, the most intuitive way is probably to rank it from a sliding scale from bad to good, like from a scale from 1 to 10, 0 to 5 stars, F to A, etc. However, The Room is a movie that breaks any conventional rating scale. By most objective metrics, it's awful, a complete failure of a film, but as a piece of sheer cinematic entertainment, you can't get much better than The Room. But far from being just a fun movie to put on when you have friends over, The Room is also a peek into Tommy Wiseau's headspace. It's a movie made without any artistic compromise, completely true to Tommy Wiseau's vision of a perfect movie. However, Tommy is also a spaceman from Mars, and his vision of a perfect movie is absurd, self-aggrandizing, but very hilarious. I'm not going to speak too much more on the movie itself, as over the last 20 years, it's been routinely picked apart by smarter people than me. Go see it if you haven't, preferably in theaters or at least with friends. The entire movie is not uploaded on archive.org, so don't even bother looking for it. As you might expect, The Room had a bit of a rocky production, with Tommy being described by the cast as a bit of a cheapskate. He allotted very little money for costumes, he refused to pay for water on set, he refused to pay for air conditioning, meaning that the set sometimes operated at a brisk 34 degrees Celsius. Caroline Munro, the actor who plays Claudette, actually fainted on set one particularly hot day. Tommy also refused to pay for a generator, meaning that every time a piece of equipment ran out of power, the production would immediately grind to a halt while they waited for the batteries to recharge, costing the crew hours a day. But paradoxically, Tommy was also a very frivolous spender. As stated before, The Room is estimated to have cost $6 million to make, 5 times as much as Reservoir Dogs. That being said, the film does not look like it cost $6 million. So, where did the money go? Well, for one, Tommy has a bit of a reputation for paying his employees pretty well. If you can put up with as many eccentricities, working under Tommy can be quite lucrative. That being said, many people did not feel like putting up with Tommy, and The Room suffered from a revolving door of technical staff.
For example, in The Room, we changed 4 times. 4 times we changed the crew as well the actors.
While Tommy was careful with spending money on his crew, Tommy did not have nearly as much trouble spending money on himself for his vision. For one, he spent $6,000 on building his own private bathroom because he didn't want to use the ones in the studio. He spent $80,000 to reshoot a scene that, according to Sestero, had no impact on the film's plot. He refused basically any advice on how to make production more cost-effective, but maybe most egregiously, he bought all the film equipment for shooting the film, which is a silly thing to do. Virtually no film studio does this. Not only is it a $1 million expense, the equipment also gets outdated very quickly. Tommy would later justify this decision by saying that he was going to use the equipment to film other projects.
You know, why I bought, for example, cameras, equipment, etc., because I was thinking about new projects.
Now, he did do this, granted, but I'll talk more on that later. Tommy also famously shot The Room on 2 cameras simultaneously, one digital and one analog. This is a very silly thing to do. For one, the cameras required different lighting configurations, and the lighting for the movie was set up in accordance with the analog 35mm camera, making the digital camera a very, very expensive paperweight. To be fair though, Tommy has since admitted that this was a bad idea.
I would do only one thing, you know what would be? Don't use the 2 cameras. You lose your money.
Adding to this, Tommy would also take the digital camera home with him every day after production, meaning that shooting could not begin until Tommy had arrived on set. Now that wouldn't be such a problem if Tommy didn't consistently run 3 hours late, meaning that the crew had to sit idle for hours every single day waiting for Tommy to arrive. Then there's the legendary rooftop scenes.
I did not hit her. It's not true. It's bullshit. I did not hit her. I did not. Oh, hi, Mark.
All of these scenes take place on a green screen set, and the San Francisco backdrop is actually filmed on top of Tommy's own building, the one on 555 Beach Street. Now this begs the question, why not just shoot the rooftop scenes on an actual rooftop that Tommy owns and can film whenever he wants? Why spend so much money and effort to make the final product look worse? This is very bizarre, but if I had to guess, it probably had to do with Tommy being paranoid and not wanting the cast to know that he owned that building. Anyone who has watched The Room knows that the ADR is very jarring, with almost all of Tommy's lines being blatantly recorded in post.
How much is it?
It'll be $18.
Here you go. Keep the change. Hi, doggy.
You're my favorite customer.
Thanks a lot. Bye.
But did you know that this practice extended to the DVD commentary?
Preparation for the football scene was very challenging because we used 2 cameras.
Plus, one of the actresses falling down in the scene.
The Room released in 2003 alongside a very interesting marketing campaign. Most famously, there was the big Hollywood billboard which Tommy rented for 5 years and on which he put his actual phone number.
And the phone number was just Tommy's phone number, and he would just answer the phone and just say like, "Are you coming to movie?" And he would be like, "Yeah, I'm coming to the movie." And he'd be like, "Great, see you there."
Now that is, unironically, a fantastic marketing solution. Another fascinating tidbit about the marketing is that the early promotional material describes The Room as an electrifying drama about love and passion, betrayal and lies. But interestingly, after the movie premiered, Tommy would immediately pivot from claiming The Room was a drama to claiming The Room was a black comedy.
You're calling it a black comedy now. Is that what you set out to do originally?
Well, let me say this way. I don't call black comedy. It is black comedy.
It is black comedy.
It's 2 different things.
And all promotional material created after the film's release was written to reflect that.
The Room, a film with the passion of Tennessee Williams, directed by Tommy Wiseau. The best movie of the year. Experience this quirky new black comedy. It's a riot.
Another interesting marketing solution was Tommy's usage of reviews. If you go to the press section of the Room website, it shows you a list of reviews for the film. One of the reviews is apparently from the San Francisco Chronicle, a pretty respectable publication. Now, if you click on it, it shows you that the review is actually from a comment section on the San Francisco Chronicle. Nice try, Tommy. In the same token, if you go to the IMDb page for The Room and go back to the very first user reviews, you'll find this quirky write-up. Great movie, new ideas, black comedy. This is very good film. I like everything about it. Acting, directing, script, and design. Tommy Wiseau delivered the role of his life. I was never bored at all watching it. It makes you think. The directing is extraordinary, and the ending to this film is surprising and scary. I give this 10 out of 10. Highly recommended. Now, this review was written by IMDb user TPW2, which might stand for Tommy Pierre Wiseau. I don't know.
And please vote for The Room at imdb.com.
But despite the marketing, The Room was a total box office bomb. If you look at the budget versus box office results, The Room is one of the least profitable movies of all time. And while Tommy would eventually break even, for now, Tommy had no choice other than to move on to his next project. Homeless in America is a mini documentary about homeless people living in Los Angeles. It revolves around Tommy and his gym buddy Kaya Redford interviewing homeless people in the LA area and getting their perspective on life, society, and their general situation. There's no real plot or through line. Most of the documentary consists of random clips of conversations spliced together with very limited voiceover and the occasionally cheesy backing track.
Now, Jesus was a homeless individual. He was born in a manger. He never had a wife. He never had a home.
The interviews themselves tend to be a bit shallow, with the questions usually amounting to things like, "How are you doing? What's your name? How long have you been homeless for? It does get better as the documentary goes on and the people they're interviewing are given greater room to indulge their perspectives, but the lack of overall cohesion kinda hinders it from being anything substantial. It's a documentary in the most literal sense. It feels like Tommy is just documenting his interactions with these people without putting their interactions into any greater context. In that sense, it's fine, but ultimately kinda inconsequential. Apparently, it's shot on the same equipment as The Room, and part of me thinks that the whole reason for this documentary's existence is to justify buying the equipment in the first place. Tommy wouldn't do anything like this again, and Homeless in America would be forgotten as soon as it was released. It was clear that Tommy's real passion still lay in traditional cinema, and he was not prepared to give up on The Room so easily. Tommy would continue to arrange screenings for The Room in the years that followed, operating at a loss for years. But then something peculiar happened. The screenings began to sell out. Tommy originally paid for The Room to play in a handful of theaters in Los Angeles for 2 weeks. This was in order to make The Room eligible for the Academy Awards, which it did not win. The screenings themselves were mostly barren, with the film earning an estimated $1,900 during its 2 opening weeks. But towards the end of its theatrical run, it caught the eye of a small group of film students. Being presumably awestruck by what they'd witnessed, they quickly spread the word about the film, and The Room slowly started building a reputation by word of mouth. For the first few years, Tommy would screen the movie for free on the last Saturday of every month. But as word spread about how great this movie was, the screening started to become fully booked.
But that was, you know, some people show up. We had problem with parking. We got the fire marshal in the.
Oh, they came because there were too many people.
Yeah, so that we got actually almost ticket like $500.
Wow.
And the guy, he said, "Hey, you cannot do this."
The Room was becoming a minor sensation in the Bay Area, and it slowly spread around the country.
I moved on. I moved to Europe and was like modeling and doing other things, and then it wasn't until 2008 that I got a call from an Entertainment Weekly reporter who had just seen the film and called it the best cinematic experience of his life.
In 2008, an article about The Room would be published in the Entertainment Weekly called The Crazy Cult of The Room, focusing on the experience of watching The Room in theaters. The article also talks about how infamous The Room had become within certain Hollywood circles, being picked up by several notable people in the Bay Area comedy scene. Paul Rudd and David Cross are both fans, as is Jonah Hill, who uses a still from the movie as his MySpace photograph. The same year, Tommy would be invited to play a director on Tim and Eric Awesome Show Great Job.
Whole thing is wrong, damn it! It's all wrong! Are you from Hollywood?
No, I just moved out here.
Yeah, that's obvious.
Tommy is such a natural fit in the Tim and Eric universe. Tommy would appear in a few comedy projects after this, but none of them really work. Tim and Eric are the only ones who have been able to leverage Tommy's strengths to create a legitimately funny show. A few years later, Tommy would ask Tim and Eric to help produce a sitcom that he had written called The Neighbors, though sadly this never panned out.
We'd met with him several times after working with him about doing something together, and it would always get weird, and you know, he did this thing, The Neighbors. Did you ever see The Neighbors?
Yeah. And since then, it's possible that the relationship between them has soured a bit.
And as you know, since you opened this little door, Tim and Eric BSing. Move on, next question.
The cult of The Room also coincided with a widespread adoption of the internet. The Room would be the subject of many a forum thread, and rips of the movie were shared illegally through services like LimeWire.
No, I can't. Anyway, how is your sex life?
I did not have sexual relations with that woman.
In 2010, Doug Walker would release his review of The Room as the nostalgia critic.
Did not hit her. It's not true.
No, don't play it again. I think the evidence is very clear. That is the worst piece of acting that has ever been put on film.
It was quite well received. It is actually the highest rated episode of the Nostalgia Critic on IMDb. Side note, Nostalgia Critic has a 7.5 on IMDb. More than Shrek 2. The fun wouldn't last long, however, as Tommy quickly took the review down for copyright infringement. This prompted a response video from Doug, in which he performs a derogatory parody of Tommy Wiseau and lambasts his critics who claim that his review doesn't fall under fair use copyright protections.
No! You can't use footage from The Room as breaking copyright!
Years later, though, they'd make peace, and Tommy allowed the Nostalgia Critic review to remain on YouTube. He even agreed to be interviewed by Doug Walker on Channel Awesome.
Tommy, do you think this film was powerful enough to influence people to get off drugs?
You are pulling my legs, Doug. But
you never know, man. You never know.
He then tried to get the interview taken down.
We've had many run-ins with this guy. He tried to take down an interview we did that he gave permission to be interviewed in. He's literally interviewed in, and he said, take it down.
Yeah, Tommy is kind of notorious for taking down videos of himself and The Room on YouTube. And while he seems a lot more chill these days, I guarantee you that if Tommy ever finds this video, it's done for. So don't forget to like and subscribe while you still can. Though Tommy didn't like this exposure at first, the internet brought The Room to new legions of fans, and Tommy was quickly becoming an unlikely internet celebrity. As the 2010s moved on, the screenings of The Room were becoming more frequent and far grander, with meet and greets, merch tables, and Q&As. These Q&As rock, by the way.
What is your favorite kind of dinosaur?
Dinosaur, 3D.
The beginning of this was The Room, but was not a room, it was The Room, THEROMM, right?
In the name of Father and Spirit, I bless you.
Will you please have sex with my wife?
Let me ask you, wait a minute, what? Do you want me to have a sex with your wife? My wife, yes, please. Yes, why not?
It's clear that Tommy loves his fans, and it's very heartwarming to see the interactions between him and his fan base. Tommy seems like he's been an outsider for most of his life, so to see him be appreciated by the crowd like this is great to see. That being said, the fame might have gotten to his head just a tiny bit. Now, we know Tommy compares The Room to Shakespeare and Citizen Kane, but did you know The Room also reduces crime in America?
Actually, The Room, condense crime in America. Why I'm saying this? Well, usually we screen The Room at midnight. Statistically speaking, the crime is committed between midnight and 3 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah, okay, Tommy. Sure. One of the many things I admire about Tommy is his ceaseless ambition. He's not going to be satisfied until every single American has seen The Room.
As an American, I like to recommend to all Americans to see The Room at the theater.
I want 80% of Americans see The Room. That's the bottom line. So, it is possible. 20% because it's R-rated.
But of course, it's not enough to see The Room just once.
Well, first of all, you have to see The Room at least 100 times. I'm not exaggerating. I'm really serious about it. I recommend you to see The Room 100 times. I always say to people, like, you have to see The Room at least 100 times.
January the 25th, 2011, the Arab Spring spreads to Egypt with a day of rage.
Tommy, if you had one thing to say to the people of Egypt right now, what would you say to them? You guys laugh, but I want to know.
No, I'm laughing too. I would tell them to see The Room 100 times.
In 2012, Tommy would star in a machinima show called Tommy Wiseau. The show is about Tommy being abducted by aliens and forced to play video games like Dark Souls and Driver San Francisco.
Fire.
Despite the premise, it's not that interesting. But thankfully, Tommy's next project is very interesting indeed. The Neighbors is a sitcom created by and starring Tommy Wiseau. It's a project Tommy had wanted to work on for years. He shot a pilot of the show in 2007, but struggled to find a willing network. That was until 2015 when, after a few false starts, it was finally picked up by Hulu. And a few months later, the entire season 1 of The Neighbors was available on streaming.
Do you have any favorite TV shows you're watching at the moment? Or? Yeah, Greg, my favorite show is Breaking Bad. What about the best sitcom I ever saw in my entire life, The Neighbors by Tommy Wiseau?
The Neighbors was a critical bomb. It is Tommy's lowest rated project on IMDb. And even the most die-hard Tommy Wiseau fans will admit that The Neighbors is rough to sit through. Hell, I like The Neighbors, and I'll be the first to tell you that The Neighbors is bad, but not the same kind of bad as The Room. You see, The Room was a heartfelt drama that eventually found life as a comedy. On the other hand, The Neighbors is Tommy Wiseau consciously writing a comedy in the form of a sitcom. And while poor drama can easily become comedy, poor comedy can easily become insufferable. And if it's one word I would use to summarize this show, it would be insufferable. 90% of this show is a slog. It doesn't look great, it doesn't sound great, the jokes aren't funny, the plot isn't interesting. Though the biggest barrier for entry is probably the production. The Room was underwhelming from a technical standpoint, but it's obvious that the movie was created by a crew with at least some film experience. The Neighbors actually reuse some of the equipment from The Room, but it doesn't really matter because the film crew consists of like 2 guys, and neither of them know how to white balance a fucking camera. I don't even know if they have a sound guy on set. The audio sounds like they're just using the raw camera audio with 0 post-production. This is hugely distracting, and it makes it very difficult to take in the plot and the characters, which is what a sitcom lives or dies on. It's baffling, because Tommy has the funds to shoot this properly. He has a major network backing him up. He didn't need to shoot this on the cheap. But the audio mixing is just the start. The Room is notorious for having awful ADR and sound effects, but The Neighbors is even worse. Fight scenes sound like this. Walkie-talkies sound like this.
Can you stop by my office right now, please? Oh, thank you.
The worst one is probably this scene.
Wait, what?
Butler. A butler. Slave. No?
I swear I didn't do that, by the way. He seriously added a whipping sound effect after mentioning the word slave. Not to mention they composed a total of 2 seconds of music for the entire series, which they loop ad nauseum. Like, I am not kidding, this goddamn loop right here takes up about 3 to 4 minutes total of every single episode. The visual effects are hella kitsch, and I love them. But I wanted to give a special shout out to Tommy's head clipping through the Neighbors logo in the intro. I don't understand how you'd even do this on accident. I also want to give a special shout out to these shots of Tommy's abs, which, come on, Tommy, who do you think you're fooling? Also, the editing is blatantly unfinished. Sometimes they accidentally leave 2 different takes of the same shot in the finished product.
Just take it outside. Thank you.
What a prick. Let me tell you.
Thank you.
Did no one watch the episode before sending it to Hulu? Some of the production decisions on this show are so absurd that they cross over into hilarity. Like, some of these scenes are straight up edited like an Eric Andre skit.
Oh, hi, Ricky Rick is here. How you doing? Hey guys, how you doing? Hey, how you doing?
Nice to see you.
Oh.
Ricky Rick. See you.
Oh.
Hey, you guys are watching Bird Up.
There actually exists an unaired pilot of the show from 2007 that is way better shot and slightly better edited. But because of that, it's also a lot less interesting. One of the most important elements of a sitcom is its characters, and The Neighbors does have characters. Believe me though, I have watched this show multiple times, and I still can't really tell these characters apart. The gals are all nymphomaniac models in bikinis or hot moms, except for Cece, I guess. And the guys are all mostly college jocks. Tommy even cast himself as a college jock in a frankly ridiculous act of stunt casting, considering Tommy is a literal boomer. It's like a real-life version of the Steve Buscemi meme. Tommy actually plays 2 characters on the show. One is Ricky Rick, a fun-loving trust fund kid who gets up to all kinds of quirky hijinks.
I'm a Dark Knight.
He's a what? You know what?
Dark Knight on your horse.
The other character is Charlie, the landlord, a straight man trying to get things running smoothly while dealing with all the crazy tenants.
Oh, God, what a day. I wondered.
What's happening?
I wonder Ed is maybe retarded or something.
According to Tommy, The Neighbors draws on real-life experience because Tommy knows someone who is a landlord. Wonder who that is. The writing of the show is very loose. It feels like Tommy just gives some general pointers of where the scenes should go, and then the cast just wings it. Some conversations are blatantly just excuses to plug his merch.
She said that you have a little thing.
Yeah, well, we both know that I don't. So.
I have no idea.
What?
I wear Tommy Wiseau underwear. I can't hide it.
Oh, by the way, I do wear my Tommy Wiseau underwear. You
Yeah?
know? Look at it.
Oh my goodness. Okay.
You like it?
Yeah.
You want to touch?
Okay.
Hold it pretty well.
At one point, he's even sporting Neighbors merch in the Neighbors. Now, there are actual jokes on the show, but they're not very good. Most of them amount to stuff like getting whipped cream in the face and being inappropriate with women, which aren't that great in premise and aren't executed well either. However, the most baffling thing about The Neighbors is its approach to social commentary. You see, despite ostensibly being a goofy comedy, the first 15 minutes of the first episode touches on themes of suicide, racism, and homophobia. Yes, you heard me. The Neighbors showcases Tommy Wiseau dealing with racism in a sitcom setting. And it goes just about how you'd expect.
Charlie! Somebody cut my internet and I know who did it.
Who cut your internet?
You know.
Who did it?
The black guy cut it.
What black guy?
Oh, you're in here too? You Chinese motherfucker.
This is a very weird way to write a sitcom. Interestingly, Tommy even went on record to boast about the racial diversity of his cast.
So you have everybody. You have a black, you have Chinese, you have white, you have this, you have that, you have a chicken too.
Now, I don't think I'm being controversial here by claiming that Tommy is a little out of touch. In fact, I'd argue that's part of his appeal. However, being a bit out of touch with societal norms is a bit of a detriment when you're trying to write social commentary. And as a result, the jokes in The Neighbors are all either very dumb or just straight up gross.
Very sweet. It's a little icon that looks like an apartment building.
Can I strangle you a little bit?
Okay, Rick.
Tommy, what the fuck? Now, look, I really enjoyed my time with The Neighbors. In fact, I laughed more at this show than I did for The Room. I think it still has that so bad it's good appeal. Though the cynical undertones and the impenetrable production means that you need a stronger stomach to be able to laugh at it the same way. It's not a show I can recommend to everyone, but if you do decide to watch it, my advice is this. Watch 10 minutes at a time. The first episode is 30 minutes long, which is way too long for a show like this. This goes down to 20 minutes an episode later in the season, but even then, I can't watch more than half an episode before my brain just shuts off. When The Neighbors first came out, Tommy would sometimes screen The Neighbors as a dual feature alongside The Room, during which he would play the entirety of Season 1 back-to-back, which is an insane thing to do.
We went and did a special screening of The Room for our film to play during the credits. It's supposed to start at midnight. It started at 2:30 a.m. because he hawks his underwear. It says Tommy Wiseau underwear, and then he shows not one, but every episode of Neighbors.
Oh boy.
Yeah.
Tommy would heavily promote The Neighbors in interviews around this time, even going on Reddit to do an Ask Me Anything thread. Hi Reddit, I'm Tommy Wiseau, also known as The Neighbors. The AMA itself went pretty well.
What's your favorite James Cameron film?
I'm listening. The Room, next question. But there's this one response in particular which I thought was interesting.
Are you going to write an autobiography? Parentheses, The Neighbors is awesome.
Yes, I am, because as you probably know, disaster artist is not 100% correct, and some people, again, are very disrespectful of my life. How dare you to bash me, to say negative things about me and my life when you don't even know me? Shame on you. So yes, absolutely, we in America, we have very dedicated people from New Orleans, and some of the function that people have are completely disrespectful. Shame on you if you blast my project. We are very dedicated to our art. Shame on you, I would say. Again, you know who you are. And also you can add about script. How dare you say that was not the script on the production of The Room? How are you have powers to criticize someone you don't even know? When you say it's not a camera, or we only this one camera, or this one, or that one, shame on you. Move on, next question. Now, Presumably, he's not talking to Reddit user The Neighbors Rocks here. He just kind of took this as an opportunity to rant about someone else who had pissed him off at that particular moment. Well, it turns out that this Reddit post wasn't just a one-off thing, and was instead part of a larger social media campaign often referred to as the Shame on You campaign. In 2015, Tommy would release a video called Tommy Wiseau Presents Shame on You, where Tommy goes off about some unknown entity who apparently has been making some disparaging statements about the room, all set to royalty-free music and the loudest sound effects in existence. Dude made 3 of these, by the way. This is just part 1 of the Shame on You trilogy, alongside Shame on You Part 2, The Shaming Continues, and Shame on You Part 3, The Reckoning. Tommy would often show these videos at screenings of The Room as sort of an appetizer, though he would not disclose who these videos were targeting, only commenting, "You know who you are." Whomever the videos were targeting had apparently made a lot of negative claims about The Room, but the one that Tommy probably took the most offense with was the claim that The Room did not have a script.
Somebody said about The Room, he didn't have a script. Oh my God, the world's tumbling. Yes, we did have a script, dickhead.
This is actually one of the reasons that Tommy sells the script on his website. If you go back to the 2015 version of the site, you can see that this too is part of the Shame on You campaign.
So I also brought you, this is for you actually, The Room script.
Oh, thank you.
112 pages.
I can't wait to dig into this.
And the script did exist, so we're getting straight down this mess right now.
I love it.
He also made the accompanying video, Tommy Wiseau's The Room script exists, showing behind the scenes footage of The Room and doing a little freeze frame every time a copy of the script comes up on screen. Nice try, Tommy. There's a few different versions of the script floating around, actually. There's the version that Tommy sells on his website, but there's also an earlier version of the script floating around that Greg Sestero has been selling at his live events. That version is apparently 40 pages shorter than Tommy's version and cuts out a lot of the weird B-plots. Then there's the third version of the script, which is the only one you'll find digitally. This one is complete bogus. Apparently it was made by a guy on 4chan as a prank. I was actually planning on buying a copy of the script from Tommy in preparation for this video, but I'm not paying $50 American to ship a stack of paper. He should sell this as a PDF or something.
Greg, you want to talk? I think I spoke to some of you about this, but I'm actually in the process of writing a book about The Room. Yes. Telling the whole story and all this madness happened.
In 2013, Greg Sestero would release The Disaster Artist, a book chronicling the dynamic relationship between him and Tommy and the turbulent production cycle of The Room. It's also where we, the public, first get some insights into who Tommy is as a person, where he's from, and how he got to where he is today. It's a great book, and is essentially the entire basis for this video. The Disaster Artist paints Wiseau as a very complex individual, and while Greg is ultimately sympathetic to the man, he's not afraid to shed light on the failings of Tommy's character. There's an audiobook available for this book, narrated by Greg Sestero himself, and if you are at all interested in The Room, I would very much recommend it. Now, Tommy does not approve of this book, at least not fully.
Have you read The Disaster Artist?
Yes, I did.
What did you think of it?
50% approval.
How much I support his book?
Sure.
50%.
I support only 40% of the book.
And then he said he approved of it 40% because he wasn't crazy about the making of The Room chapters, because he feels The Room is a great film, while I feel it's a great film for different reasons.
However, the book became very popular amongst The Room fanatics, and a few years later it would be adapted into a feature film, releasing in 2017.
This is my movie, and this is my life.
The Disaster Artist movie stars James and Dave Franco as Tommy Wiseau and Greg Sestero, respectively. In some ways, it's quite a faithful adaptation. In particular, a lot of care has been taken to replicate the visual aspects. They replicate a lot of the shots of The Room, and the results are pretty damn spot on. Some of these set recreations are also very faithful to how they actually looked. Apparently, Tommy's apartment in the movie looks almost identical to its real-life counterpart. The plot of the movie follows the book closely, starting from when Greg first met Tommy in Gene Shelton's acting lab and ending at the premiere of The Room. However, while the plot of the movie is pretty accurate to the book, they've obviously needed to take some subtle creative liberties here and there to adapt it to the silver screen. But in doing so, they also make some narrative choices that severely impact the tone of the original story.
I thought it's not an easy book to adapt. I thought they did a great job making the story universal. And I think I really enjoyed the movie for what it was. Obviously, the book is darker, but no,
Much darker.
The movie is essentially an attempt at adapting The Disaster Artist into a feel-good comedy about an eccentric filmmaker and his best friend triumphing through adversity. And in order to achieve that, some of the rougher edges of the book are sanded off. Tommy especially is portrayed quite charitably, with the film leaving out a lot of the worst stuff in the book. Now that doesn't mean that the film is bad. I think it's a great flick. Hell, it was even nominated for Best Adapted Screenplay at the Oscars. Unlike the book, Tommy is very supportive of the film.
How closely do you think James and the story captured your essence?
I would say 99.9%.
One of the stipulations when signing off his rights for the movie was that Tommy gets a cameo where he stars alongside James Franco.
But he didn't read his contract very well. And what it said was, all we had to do was shoot it. We didn't have to put it in the movie.
The Disaster Artist would release to critical and commercial acclaim. It was a success at the box office, and James Franco would eventually go on to win a Golden Globe for his role as Tommy Wiseau.
But somebody was chicken in the Golden Globe Award. Somebody was chicken. Took the mic from Tommy Wiseau, that's it.
The Disaster Artist had successfully put Tommy Wiseau firmly in the mainstream. In 2017, he'd make appearances on Jimmy Kimmel, Howard Stern, etc.
No, actually, you know, we always say N-words, and as you know what I mean, right?
Yeah. You have enough black friends that you can use the N-word around them?
Yeah.
That's incredible.
The Disaster Artist also brought a newfound interest in Wiseau and his life, but perhaps a bit more than Tommy had ever bargained for.
You will never get to the bottom of Tommy Wiseau. The money was less important to him than the idea that he was God.
Alongside The Disaster Artist, there was another movie in the works about The Room. Not a biopic this time, but a documentary called A Room Full of Spoons. Unlike The Disaster Artist, which was a multi-million-dollar blockbuster, A Room Full of Spoons is a largely self-financed, low-budget film headed by a small amateur crew, consisting of Fernando Ferrero, Martin Brasco, and director Rick Harper. The film gets its name from the many framed pictures of spoons featured in the background of certain scenes in The Room. The story goes that the house set they built for The Room was too empty, so the art department was sent out to purchase picture frames to decorate the set. These picture frames had stock photos of spoons in them, which Tommy didn't bother to have replaced. So Johnny just has a bunch of framed pictures of spoons in his house.
Why does the apartment contain a plastic spoon picture that is framed?
Because, you know, plastic is cheaper than wood.
This has become a bit of an in-joke in the Room fandom, with screenings being absolutely bombarded by plastic spoons whenever they show up on screen. A Room Full of Spoons is an in-depth look at the Room universe. It contains interviews of a good chunk of the original cast, who paint a vivid picture of how it was like to work under Tommy.
And Tommy threw a water bottle at my head. I couldn't even believe it.
It was all I could do not to run screaming out of the theater.
The film also serves to document the Room fandom, even going as far as interviewing some of the very first people to discover the movie back in 2003. A Room Full of Spoons also delves into Tommy's personal life. They actually uncover what they believe is Tommy's real name and city of origin, even going as far as traveling to Poland to meet up with Tommy's relatives. Now keep in mind, Tommy is the kind of guy who manually edits a 20-year-old commercial because he doesn't want the public to know that he used to sell jeans at Sutter Street. So naturally, when he caught wind of this, Tommy went absolutely ballistic. While he was originally on board with the documentary back when production began in 2011, it wouldn't take long until he started getting cold feet. He pulled himself from the production shortly after and didn't want anything to do with the film. Nevertheless, the crew soldiered on, and by 2016, the film was ready for release. However, once they started promoting it online, Tommy was rabid. He would start admonishing the crew through social media, hounding them on the contents of the documentary.
You know, we started getting all of this backlash on Twitter and on Facebook, and he was calling me a liar and a bully. This is, now, you have to keep in mind, just to give some context, he had never seen the movie at this point. You know, there was a point where I was getting probably 4 or 5 emails a day from Tommy asking what's in the movie, I want to see the movie, and so on.
Remember those shame on you videos from before? Yeah, these guys are the people those videos are directed to.
He called me like a fraud and all types of nonsense, and he puts like a silhouette version of my poster of like one of our first promotional posters that we did, and he shoots it up and blows it up and all this craziness.
The documentary was first shown in 2016, where it had a limited theatrical run. However, very shortly after, Tommy filed an injunction against the film's creators, prohibiting them from distributing the movie any further.
He had an injunction filed at the court, an ex parte injunction, which basically means that this is unilateral. They went to the court and said, please sign this because if this movie comes out, there's going to be irreparable harm to my reputation and to the sales of my film. And all of this nonsense is complete bullshit.
The main point of contention was that A Room Full of Spoons was infringing on Tommy Wiseau's copyright.
So he filed a claim with the Superior Court of Ontario, basically claiming that our documentary is copyright infringement because we use 7 minutes in total of clips from The Room.
This case would eventually find its way to the Superior Court of Ontario in 2020. This means that the judgment relating to the case is a matter of public record. So let's go through it. Wiseau asserted and continues to assert that Room Full of Spoons breaches the plaintiff's copyright in The Room, and that the defendants have unlawfully invaded Wiseau's privacy, misappropriated his personality, and committed the tort of passing off. Alright, to explain some of the legal jargon here, misappropriation of personality in this case means unlawfully appropriating Tommy's image for commercial gain, and passing off means that the film or its supplementary materials is misleading the public into thinking that the film is a Tommy Wiseau production or produced with the approval of Tommy Wiseau. In November 1st, 2017, the injunction was lifted, with the judge concluding that the plaintiffs fell seriously short of the sort of disclosure required for an ex parte injunction. The judge goes on to state that Wiseau painted a picture of himself as a serious filmmaker, complaining that the documentary mocks, derides, and disparages The Room. Wiseau did not disclose to the court that The Room's fame is not because it is a serious film, but because its fame rests on its apparently abysmal quality as a movie, and that people attend the film to mock it, not admire it. Ouch! After a failed attempt at a settlement, it was decided that the case would go to trial, scheduled on January 6, 2020. But as the date approached, Tommy repeatedly tried to adjourn the trial, including asking the judge to direct the Crown to prosecute the defendants for perjury. The record goes on. On December 30th, 2019, Wiseau brought a last-minute motion to adjourn the trial on the basis that he did not have counsel. This too was refused by Cohen J., who noted that the position the plaintiffs found themselves was a situation entirely of their own making and one which I have warned Mr. Wiseau on many occasions. To use Mr. Wiseau's language, it would be a major disservice to justice to allow him to delay access to justice to the defendants and others in the litigation system simply because he refuses to deal with lawyers on ordinary commercial terms. At this point, Tommy had gone through about 5 lawyers, most of whom had quit the case. Tommy then tried to withdraw from the case, with the intent of pursuing the defendants in another jurisdiction. This did little to stop the trial, however, which still commenced on January 6, 2020. On the first day, Tommy was expected to be the first witness. However, when the day came, Tommy didn't show, with his attorney stating, Wiseau had some concerns for his safety, asserting that he had received threats and that some of the defendants have an unhealthy obsession with Wiseau, which apparently made him feel insecure. A few days later, however, Tommy would appear in court, and the trial continued as normal. In the end, the documentary crew were cleared of all charges, with the judge determining that the initial injunction was wrongly granted as a result of Wiseau misleading the court. This injunction meant that they weren't able to release A Room Full of Spoons at the same time as The Disaster Artist, which would have greatly boosted their revenue. In the end, the judge ordered Wiseau to pay $550,000 American dollars in damages to the documentary crew. But that's not all. Remember the Shame on You campaign? In one of the videos, Tommy claims that the documentary team were acting illegally, including that they were stealing from Tommy Wiseau. That's defamation. This, combined with Tommy's poor conduct towards the documentary crew, meant that Tommy was ordered to pay an extra 200,000 Canadian dollars in punitive damages, leaving the total costs at 700,000 American dollars. Shortly thereafter, Tommy would appeal the case. This appeal would be dismissed. Tommy then tried to take action in the Ontario Superior Court of Justice, seeking damages of $3.5 million and in additional relief to destroy under oath all copies, including the master copy, of the defendant's Room Full of Spoons documentary. That didn't go anywhere, with the court stating that this proceeding was quite clearly an abusive process. Tommy also took action in the Federal Court of Canada, seeking damages of $2.7 million. This case also didn't go anywhere. Later, Tommy appeals the case. The appeal gets rejected. Tommy then appeals the appeal decision. And as of 2023, this appeal is still pending. Tommy also took action in the Superior Court of Los Angeles, an American jurisdiction. As of today, this case is also pending.
Alright, so this video has taken 17 years to make, and in the meantime there have been some developments. Basically, the case in the Superior Court of Los Angeles has wrapped up, with the court basically saying that, look, this case has already been settled, the Canadian courts have already ruled in the documentary crew's favor, and all of the appeals have affirmed that ruling, so there's no point in dragging this out any further. Now, I don't know if Tommy can appeal this decision. I assume if he can, he will. But in the meantime, I believe the Canadian proceedings are still ongoing.
According to Rick Harper, Tommy now owes over $1 million in damages, which he has not attempted to pay. It seems that Tommy wants to keep this film in litigation limbo for as long as he can, no matter the price.
Oh, how nice.
You know what I mean? Like, we go for
like
truth.
I have experienced court, so that's fine. Move on, next question.
In 2017, Greg Sestero would release the first installment of his Best Friends duology, consisting of Best Friends Volume 1 and 2. These movies feature Tommy and Greg Sestero both playing co-lead as the titular best friends. Tommy plays a mortician named Harvey, whose specialty is making face masks for people who died in gruesome ways, so that their bodies are more sightly at their funeral. John, played by Greg Sestero, is employed by Harvey as a mortician's assistant, and strikes a lucrative plan to extract gold dentures from the teeth of the corpses and sell them on the black market for a substantial profit. It's safe to say that Tommy is the main draw of this movie. This is Tommy's first dramatic film performance since The Room, and it's very novel to see Tommy back in the saddle with a competent script and a role that was specifically written with his strengths in mind. And interestingly enough, he probably gives the best performance in the film. Tommy's acting here is not great by most traditional metrics, but his whack-ass performance is great fun to watch, and really brings some much-needed vitality into these movies. Also, Tommy is legitimately creepy in this movie, and it's mostly on purpose. Massive props to Greg for actually being able to utilize Tommy in such a great way.
I want someone to watch this movie, not know anything about The Room, and think, wow, that actor like really pulled off that part.
Beyond that, Tommy would also direct and produce a movie on his own, Big Shark.
How's your face feel?
Feels good.
Water, look at that.
Oh, God. Tommy has been screening the film in select theaters since April of 2023, though mostly in the US for the time being. Because of that, I haven't gotten the opportunity yet to see the film myself. One thing that makes me really curious about it though is that it's a monster movie focused on a big CGI shark where the post-production credits consists of literally one guy, and I can't wait to see how that pans out.
Oh, even Spielberg, it's fine. I met the guys, he's nice, but we're not on the same page. I'm sorry, we're not, okay? That's how we do Big Shark, because I personally think I can do a better job.
Other than that, there's a remake of The Room coming up starring Bob Odenkirk as Johnny.
Oh, I work.
Interestingly enough, despite Odenkirk having a background in comedy, it's not played as a goof, at least not overtly. It seems almost more of a challenge to see how well they're able to sell the original script, given better acting and direction. So that's where we are today. But what's next for Tommy? Well, Tommy has said for years that he's been working on a movie called Foreclosure.
What's the next project for Wiseau Films?
Foreclosure. Yes. We're working on Foreclosure. We'll be releasing it hopefully in September.
He's also working on a vampire movie, apparently.
I hear you have a project involving vampires. Is that developing?
Yes.
So I'm working on vampire movies as well. That's the story.
Fun fact, in the original script for The Room, Johnny was supposed to be a vampire. Go figure. Speaking of The Room, Tommy still has big plans for the movie. He's gonna make a sequel to The Room.
People don't understand that Johnny can survive. You never know.
I don't know how Johnny can survive.
It can survive the bullet.
He's gonna make a prequel to The Room.
Your question is, do we do the prequel or do we do the sequel? Yeah. Both. We may do it.
Same movie!
He's gonna make The Room 3D.
My idea is to actually do the room in 3D.
Oh my God, could you imagine?
He's gonna make The Room for Broadway.
But at this time, we are working The Room on Broadway.
The Room was originally based on a 600-page novel written by Tommy himself, so maybe he's gonna release that.
You have to understand the novel is 600 pages. What you see in the screen, you have 99 minutes, so there's no way I can put 600 pages on the screen.
He's also talked about creating a museum exhibit for The Room.
My idea is to open like a little museum, temporary museum, so everything we have, including some of the set, believe it or not, we still have it.
It's clear that The Room is still Tommy's baby, and he's not done with it anytime soon. Welcome to the end of the video. I hope you've been paying attention because it's time for the quiz. Question 1. What is Tommy Wiseau's favorite movie?
What's your favorite movie? Movie? Yeah. Well, The Room is the favorite, but I like also The Citizen Kane.
I think Tommy is one of the few film directors who'll openly claim that their favorite movie is the one that they made. I like how he doesn't even try to be humble about it. He knows that The Room is his masterpiece, but does he really understand why? While he's obviously very happy with the film's success, I don't think Tommy understands the appeal of The Room. To him, it really is his own Citizen Kane, his own perfect movie. And it's sad in a way. Even though The Room is celebrated by fans the world over, Tommy can't really celebrate with them because he doesn't see The Room the same way that the world sees The Room. Though at the end of the day, I don't think Tommy really cares that much. I think Tommy is pretty happy about where he is in his life. He accomplished his big dream.
You know, you can, your dream come true, that's about all it is. So you can live within your dream.
Despite what he may say in interviews, I don't think Tommy's dream was to be a writer or a director or an actor. I think what Tommy wanted most of all was recognition. Tommy's dream was to become a celebrity. And say what you want about Tommy, he is great at being a celebrity. The man has a larger-than-life, almost cartoonish quality to him. It's hard to imagine a guy like Tommy existing anywhere outside of Hollywood. But despite being in the limelight for close to 2 decades now, we're still not sure who he really is. Maybe the most interesting thing about Tommy's origin story is that it's so full of holes, so many facets of his persona that are so up for interpretation. And while this video has probably shed some light on Tommy's life, I don't think I'm able to properly answer the question of who Tommy is. And I'm glad for that. I don't want to deflate the mystery of Tommy Wiseau, just expand upon it. I wanted to answer the questions I had about him going in and replace them with new, more detailed questions. And I like to think that I succeeded in doing that. That's all I got for now. And remember, you're my favorite customer. Bye-bye.